Hey guys, so just before I get into this video, I wanted to say that it was sponsored by GraphicStock, and they are the largest library online of images, photos, like vectors, and illustrations. There are over 300,000 that you can choose from, and all of them are royalty free. So if you want to try them out, I have a link in the description for a free 7-day trial to them, where you can download up to 140 pieces of content. Okay, let's get into the video. So just before I start talking about lighting, I wanted to let you know that obviously all of these are my own opinions, my own advice, and I have not been professionally trained, so all of this just comes from my experience digitally painting. So if you don't like any of the advice, I warned you, okay? I'm not professionally trained. Okay, so getting on to the first point, which I would say you should consider what is your light source. Knowing what your light source is will help you know the color of the light, obviously, right? If it's natural light, the color of the light can be either like a light gray, up to a white, to golden or orange, depending on the time of day, if there are any clouds outside, you know, how sunny it is. And if you know the color of the light, that can also help you determine the mood of the piece. Like, I think this is kind of evident, right? Because grays would be dark and sad and lonely looking, but like golden light would be nostalgic and emotional looking, right? It's common sense, I guess. Now that you know what your light source is going to be, where is it coming from? I mean, if it's natural lighting, obviously it's coming from the sun, so you have to decide where the sun is. Now, in my painting, it's at sunset, right? So it's very low, and it's coming at her from the left side, I believe, yes. It's pretty much directly from the left, or a little bit higher. So I determined where the light source is actually going to be, and I know how it's going to affect my subject. Everything is three-dimensional, so just keep that in mind when you're painting. If you don't know the 3D shape of your subject, you could reduce them to spheres and cones and cubes, and that would make it very easy to see what side would be illuminated by the light source and what side would be in the shadows. So that's another good thing to keep in mind, the direction of the light and its effect on different shapes. Then, if you have that in mind, the color of the light and where it's coming from, you need to keep in mind how that lighting affects the surface you're painting. Skin is pretty translucent, especially if you're paler. The paler you are, the more translucent skin is. So when light hits it, it glows a little bit more. If the sun would, for example, in my painting, when the light hits from the side the way it does, like in a very golden way, it would just make the cheeks and the nose and stuff, it would make them appear glowier, you know, because the skin is translucent, so the light can shine through it, as opposed to something like hair, which is very shiny and it's pretty opaque, you know. It just reflects light very easily, and it's very shiny, you know, because of the hard surface and how it's like super sleek, you know? So keep in mind the density, the porosity of the surface you're painting, and that you should be good. Then the last tip I would give would be to pay attention to details. All the light sources should make sense, right? If it's natural light, all light should be coming from one direction, the sun, or the moon, I guess. I mean, unless there was another source that was reflecting the sunlight onto your subject, you could just keep that in mind. But the light that would be reflected would be much duller than the sunlight, and it would also probably have a certain color because the surface reflecting it would probably be of some color, you know? So keep that in mind. I mean, if you have something that's super stylistic, it just make sure that it makes sense in the context of your picture, you know? Or if it, just make sure it's purposeful. It shouldn't be a mistake. When I first started painting digitally, I would make the subject, people I would paint, their whole face would be illuminated from every angle, basically. And in a real life situation, you'd only get that with like a ring light or a lamp that was shining directly in front of your face. So it wasn't really realistic. It doesn't look that great, you know. Developing shadows is a good way to create some depth in your painting, so just make sure you keep that in mind. And another thing would be just tiny little details that could be the effects of light. Now, in my painting, I made one pupil constricted and the other dilated. I don't think in real life that would actually happen. I mean, at least not that strong. wrongly, like one pupil is super constricted, one is like really dilated, but I think it looks kind of interesting because the light is hitting the constricted one and the one that's dilated is in the shadows. And so that was kind of a detail that I added just because I thought it would be interesting to see. I don't know how realistic that is, but I think it is pretty interesting. So just keep little things like that in mind when you're painting light. I hope these tips were helpful. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up, and you can actually subscribe to see more because I put out new videos every Sunday. So I will talk to you guys next time. Bye!